One thing that never ceases to amaze me is how fast technology is evolving. You know how every year you grow older? It seems like that year passed quicker than the previous year, like time is increasing exponentially. Well, the thing about technology is it is increasing exponentially. I'd like to take a look at this chart I found in Time magazine a few years ago. It's about an article about singularity theory, which was made popular by Ray Kurzweil. We're not going to talk about singularity today. What I want to do is I'm going to look at the historical data on this chart. If you look to the left of the hatched area, you see a series of points. Each of these points represent different computers and when they were released, each one of them being more or less more powerful than their predecessors. So if you plot this data, you end up with an exponential curve you can see. So technology is increasing exponentially. And what is technology? Well, technology is our knowledge of the natural world. And since our knowledge of the natural world is increasing exponentially, the result is technological exponential growth. So when I was going off to college, most of my peers had an idea what they wanted to be when they grow up. I didn't. Many wanted to be doctors, lawyers, accountants. And of course, they changed their major about 5 times before they finished. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to learn how the world works. I wanted to learn what's going on, what's happening around me. So I chose the field of mechanical engineering. The reason I chose mechanical engineering because the curriculum they offered seemed to have just enough chemistry, had just enough math, just enough physics, so that I could develop what I believe would be a fundamental understanding as a starting point of trying to figure out what's happening. So as an engineer, what we did is we applied knowledge of the natural world. And we did this basically working in the Newtonian world, which, as you know, is a 4-dimensional world. We have x, y, and z coordinates, and then we have time. And time is linear, and time is constant. And this was believed to be fact universally until this guy in the middle here came along. Albert Einstein started studying what happens when things start to approach the speed of light. And he developed the laws of relativity. Thing is these laws did not work in the Newtonian world, nor did the Newtonian world laws work in the world of relativity. And then these guys came along on the right of him, that's Niels Bohr and Max Planck. The two of them, along with a few others, started studying what happens when something gets really small, like microscopically small. Well, they developed quantum mechanics. And the thing about that is the quantum mechanical laws didn't work in the Newtonian world either, and vice versa. So an interesting quote I found in my physics book, modern physics book, as an undergraduate, says, as with relativity, the quantum theory requires a modification of our ideas regarding the physical world. So it's important to keep an open mind. Now, as an artist, I work with multiple medias. I work with painting and sculpture, but I also do a lot of work with technology. And so I'm often called a new media artist. I don't really love that word because of the term new, and it implies that it's old. There's nothing old to it. There's no history to it, that it's all new. As where I believe artists are artists and they act as artists and we behave in this artistic process. I coined a term I call multimedia fundamentalism. Artists working in all media possess fundamental principles. So one particular media that I want to talk about today is called projection mapping. Projection mapping is basically the act of taking an irregular shaped object and making it a projection surface. In particular, I want to talk about multiple projector projection mapping. So if you have a 3-dimensional object and you want to map it, video project, you have to use multiple projectors. Or if you say, like when you go to a movie theater, you have a projector and it projects on a big screen and it fills it up and it's all great. What happens if that screen was so big it required 20 projectors? Well, then you would use the process of projection mapping. I want to show you this flowchart that I made here, which kind of sums it up in a nutshell. What we do is we create our video art content, and then we take that video art content and we deliver it to a server or a series of servers that then take the overall video piece, break it into chunks, and send them out simultaneously to a series of projectors. Each of these projectors are aligned, so the result is one seamless image. Now, I want to talk for a minute about painting. This particular painting you see is found in a cave in France. It dates back to about 10 to 15,000 BC, so painting has a lot of history. Now, this is going to be the shortest lecture in art history you'll ever get. I want to jump forward to the age of Botticelli. All art historians will agree that Botticelli was a significant player in the development of painting. However, Botticelli didn't come out of a vacuum. Botticelli had techniques, he had procedures, he had concepts that were passed to him from his predecessors, dating all the way back to the cave-dwelling artist who made the cave paintings. And now I'd like to jump forward to American abstract expressionism and Jackson Pollock. You know, people always say, you know, I love Jackson Pollock, that guy broke all the rules. Well, I know he broke the speed limit and the DUI rules when he crashed his car in the Hamptons that night. But other than that, I don't really see him as being a big rule breaker. Jackson Pollock studied art. He even went to the New York Studio School. He understood art history. He understood composition. He understood color theory. He had many tools that were passed to him from his predecessors that date all the way back to that cave. Now I'd like to go back to that cave again. Imagine you're in this cave. There's a cave-dwelling artist working on a painting. He has to see because it's dark in the cave, so he lights a fire. This is a light source. When he stands between the light source and his canvas, he's doing projection. He's casting shadows. And in fact, we like to think we're clever because we use software, microprocessors, sensors, and whatnot to make interactive artworks, but it could be argued that this same artist who made this painting was doing the very first interactive artworks as well. Now I want to jump to Plato's allegory of a cave. This is a situation where there are prisoners shackled from childhood, and the only thing they can see is a wall in front of them. And this wall is actually a projection surface. And there is a light source of a fire behind them, and puppeteers walking around creating this imagery. And so Plato says that the perceived reality of these prisoners is this projection, and that becomes the reality. And he uses this argument because he says that the philosopher is the prisoner who escapes the cave and goes outside and is enlightened. Nonetheless, he references the power of projection art to reinforce his philosophical ideas. Now, I don't know what the definition of art is, the true definition, because there are several definitions, and I don't necessarily agree with any one wholeheartedly. But like Plato, I do agree that art is powerful, and art influences thought, and thought influences actions. And who's better at that than religion? This picture up on the top left here is actually a mosque in Iran where they're using projection. And the top right image is a Christian church using projection. The picture on the bottom, however, is particularly interesting to me because it's not inside the church. It's adjacent to the church. It's in Africa, and the sun is reflecting off of the stained glass and projecting on the adjacent architecture, which is similar to what myself and my colleagues like to do in projection mapping. So, in a nutshell, I want to say that projection does have a history that dates back possibly to the early days of painting. And myself and my colleagues, I think I can speak for, as projection artists who use projection as a media, you know, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. And we are part of a long lineage, and we have an obligation and responsibility to contribute to that. Now I'd like to talk about a project that we recently did. I want to show you this image here. This photo was taken from the window of my studio. This is the Manhattan Bridge anchorage in a neighborhood called Dumbo in Brooklyn. Now first I want to say, working in large scales like this with projection mapping is really, most artists are not afforded the opportunity to do it because of two main reasons. One is because of the technological demands. There's a lot of hardware, there's a lot of software, there's understanding of optics, things you have to master. And in addition to that, there's another component, which is finances. Large scale projects like this take hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. So we were able to overcome these obstacles by joining forces with two entities. One is the Dumbo Arts Festival. This is an annual festival of arts that happens in the neighborhood. And the other one is a guy named Josh Weisberg, who owns a company called World Stage. So together, we were all three able to unite and overcome these challenges. We created an exhibition that was an overall video exhibition called Codex Dynamics. I co-curated it with my colleague Leo Kelbs. And within this exhibition, I made a video mapped piece that I did with my collaborator and good friend Farkas Falup, as well as the other guys in Glowing Bulbs, which is his arts collective located in Budapest, Hungary. Now what I'd like to show you here, this is a little bit of the technical aspects of mapping. This is a three-dimensional model that we had to make of the bridge in order to start the process. But before we go into any technical aspects, what we do as artists is we collaborate and we develop a dialogue about what are we going to do, why are we doing this, what could it mean, or what should it not mean, and start that process. So we ended up going back to this Newtonian concept I talked about in the beginning, and time being linear, and observation of the natural world. And there were Egyptians, there were Mayans, Chinese, many different cultures that developed timekeeping methodologies. Now, these methodologies were based on their observation of the natural world, and specific, the cycles of the sun, the cycles of the moon, the constellations. But now scientists are performing experiments and observing quantum mechanical situations where time is not linear and time is not constant. And you don't necessarily have a 1 or a 0, you can have a 1 and a 0. So as all these things are starting to be observed and we're learning about, eventually they're going to be digested and pulled into the singularity curve. And they're going to become part of our lives, part of products, part of weapons, part of medical issues. And how will we deal with this? Because it's a subject that I think that we're not really addressing or thinking about at this point. So I want to show you this video. World Stage brought in a company called D3. D3 makes the servers that I showed you on the flowchart that does the playback. Well, the wonderful thing about D3 is it has what they call pre-visualization, pre-viz. And so it allows us to actually take our computer model and put it into the D3, and also put in our art and see it evolving in real time. And we can fly through, we can walk through it, we can stand anywhere and see this artwork unfold. Now the thing about video mapping is it's a completely virtual art form. We make it in our computers. It doesn't exist outside of them. That's until we get our projectors in place. We had 20 projectors inside the archway. We had 6 projectors up in my studio. And together we started throwing photons against the wall, and then this thing becomes real. People can walk up to it, they can walk inside of it, they can touch it, it becomes very tangible. Now, what you're going to see here is actually representation of the sun, which is evocative of early observations of nature and of the world, and how it influenced our perspective of time. Now, as the piece unfolds, we don't even do like Kurzweil, we don't extrapolate. We just pose ideas in a sense of trying to create question and trying to stimulate dialogue on subjects of this matter. So now, what I want to show you is a video edit of the piece that we did. It's called An Inquiring Age, and this is an excerpt of documentary edit of the piece.